Welcome to part 6 of my in-depth look at my mission trip to Sweden 2015. This is the Karlstad second half of the visit. Just to recap briefly over part 1, the walk around the city and the outskirts of the churches, the wonderful meeting and lunch and fellowship at Karlstad, and getting lost, trying to find the church, and that took me up to the walking and praying around other churches around the city centre and in the city centre, praying over the city several times and that took me up to the Saturday. So this is Sunday to Monday. There's a reason why all this second half is just dedicated to the Sunday, because there was a lot that happened on the Sunday, and as you'll see, it was very emotional and a big wake-up call to affirm where I should be and how and why. In the prep for the mission, before I left, I got talking to a pastor, Leonard, and as I covered up before, he helped me with a lot of the understanding and where I should go and things like that, and suggestions and help. And he suggested that I asked for a church on Sunday that I should worship while I was in Karlstad, and he recommended Karlstad, which means the cross, and cross church. So I got there pretty early in the morning, before anyone else, and the doors were all shut, and I went and had breakfast. About 150 metres up the road was the lake that runs through Karlstad. So I sat there and had lunch, breakfast I mean, and just prayed to God and thinking, what do I expect? How do I try and fit in? And basically left myself open to God, saying, teach me what you want to teach me, and help me with my fears of all of this, and help me to do your will. It was a pretty scary moment. I'd never experienced the church service in Swedish at all, or in Sweden, and this was the first time. But I went back after having breakfast and met the pastor. Nice bloke, really welcomed me, showed me around the church, and then said, do I want to go with him and prep, and while he goes to the supermarket and preps for his sermon. And I thought, okay, interesting. So we went to the local supermarket around the corner, and we bought some avocados. I shall never ever doubt whether to use anything for a sermon ever again, because that will always stick with me. I didn't understand the sermon at all, because it was all in Swedish, but he did give me a brief outline of it as we were walking through and walking around the supermarkets. And I'd met the associate pastor before. My wife thinks I call her a sociopath. She's not, associate pastor, because the reason why this is my second attempt at doing this, because I forgot to record the first one. And I met her, Sarah, very nice lady, and I got the feeling from both of them that God was in this church, and they were going to do some wonderful things to the kingdom here and in the community. And the pastor introduced me to the worship leader for that morning, and we had a chat, at the front of the church before anyone came in. And he then apologised to me, and I was like, okay. And I asked why, and he said, well, I normally choose one or two songs in English, even though all the rest are in Swedish, because they're dual language, so they do. Because I've chosen, all the songs I've chosen today are Swedish songs. And I was like, not a problem. You're not here to sing to me. And I didn't really expect to understand any and fully follow any of them anyway. So after I finished having a chat with him and getting to know him a bit, and I sat right at the back of the church, and the pastor introduced me to an expat Brit who married a Swedish woman, is now living in Sweden, and he's a pastor of a church in another village. And Simon sat with me through the entire service and offered to translate and offered to teach me on what I didn't understand. He said, if you've got any questions, please ask. And it was just such a comforting thing that God had put him there on his day off, and the pastor listened and helped, and it was a weird feeling, but made me feel so loved that I was meant to be there. That was the first really bit of a God affirming that, but it came to worship songs, and I spent months before I'd left Sweden learning one or two Swedish worship songs off YouTube, and the first one I'd learnt really was "He's Mighty to Save." I hadn't learnt it, where I could recite it and sing it without the words. I'd learnt it to read it. Some of it I had learnt in my head, and little did I know that this was the first song that the worship leader was playing, and it came up, and I just chuckled. I had to laugh. I was thinking, if I ever needed a slap in the face from God, a blatant sign of God standing there saying, "This is where you're meant to be. You have listened. Thank you." That was it. And I'd sat there, and I felt, I'd meant to be. I felt this was the church that I'd always been to. It was that kind of feeling within. And we sat down and we went through a second song. And the second song was the second song I'd learnt off YouTube. I can't remember the name of it. But it was just, I was just so gobsmacked. And it was a humbling experience, knowing that God had set all this up, that he'd taken my fears, that I'd prayed to him in the morning and the lead up to this morning, and had literally just swept them all away. It came to the end of the service, and we went out to the kitchens and the seating area, and we had food. We had a little bit of food and drink. And Simon again, very blessed. It was an absolute blessing, and he made the donation so I could eat. And I was quite prepared to pay for it, but Simon felt called to bless me and pay for it, and I was just gobsmacked. It was fellowship and family that I never ever imagined would have happened on this day, because I didn't expect anything more than me just walking in, talking to the pastor, and then a few occasional people come up and saying, "What, who are you?" and stuff like that. But God had other plans. I asked about churches having a Sunday service in Karlstad. I said, what am I going to do for my Sunday afternoon? And to much of my surprise, he said churches very rarely have Sunday afternoon services in Sweden at all. And I was like, we talked why, and I could kind of see why from his answers that they don't. And it kind of didn't sit right with me that I was so used to having a Sunday service, even though I'm not really able to go to the one here in Wolverhampton, because I get up first thing Monday morning about 5:30. I'm getting old, I need me sleep. So that kind of threw up my afternoon, and Simon then turned around and said, well, why don't you come for lunch with me and my wife to the lake? Okay. So it wasn't a problem. We went back to his house, and I did the typical Swedish thing that I'd been studying up on, the Swedish culture, and I took my shoes off when I entered the house, and they looked quite surprised that I'd learned that I'd looked at culture before I'd left. And I was like, yeah, I'd done a little bit, so I didn't, try and offend as many people as few as people as I could. So, we made sandwiches. We had a great chat in their kitchen, and I'd learnt from his wife that they didn't have a kettle. No kettle. Every house in Britain has a kettle. Not many houses in Sweden have a kettle. This was shocking. This has to change. I'm going to campaign for kettles in every house. But, we got in the car and we drove about 35 to 40 minutes south of Karlstad down to the lake. We drove through all the forest. And I had to walk through the forest not knowing where I was going. I didn't ask. I just didn't think to ask. Then we walked through the forest and I was just so gobsmacked by the beautiful scenery. And, the sun coming through the trees and everything else. And we walked out, and next thing I know, we're standing on the edge of these huge rocks. And it went on for a while. And there was about a couple of hundred Swedish people just sitting on all these rocks enjoying the sun and swimming. And we walked. It's been halfway through it. Well, it fell halfway through it. And we met up with a couple of other Christian families who were there, who were their friends. And I recognised one. He was the worship leader. So we said hello, and it was nice to meet him and his family, and a couple of the other families as well, Christian families as well. So we sat there for a couple of hours. We ate, and we talked, and we shared fellowship, and they were very, very understanding that my knowledge of Swedish language and the ability to speak was not great at all. So all the conversations they had with me were in English, and being a dual language country, I felt very blessed that they would do that for me. And we talked, we shared encouragement, we shared faith, and I learned a lot from them about the troubles of the church in Sweden, the struggles on mission and outreach, and we just talked. It was like I'd been there and I'd known them for years. There was no me or you, it was just family. And, they shared lunch with me. I hadn't bought anything because I hadn't known. And they shared all their food with me. They shared their drink with me. And it was, it was only something that God could have done. God meant us to be there. God gave me the feeling that, this was how it was meant to be. And I was humbled that, that these people who had only known me for at most a couple of hours, sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes 5 minutes, had welcomed me into their little group. And, took the time to know me. I took the time to get to know them. And we sat there for a couple of hours, and Simon and his wife, gladly gave me a lift back to the hostel where I was staying. And I got talking to some of the people over the hostel, the guests and the person who was running the hostel. And they'd asked me why I was in the country and what I was doing, and I told them. I didn't go deeply into everything. And the answer I got back was, well, we don't need God. Why? Sweden's a great country. It's a wealthy country. We don't have problems. We don't have huge problems like the rest of the world. And I wanted to sit down and have long discussions with them, but I couldn't. It wasn't time. It didn't feel right to. I just said, well, maybe one day you'll see you'll see that, God is, everybody needs God. And, I just left it in God's hands that, that little bit was going to be placed on their heart, and that some other Christian would come along and place another bit and water the bit I did, and eventually one day somebody would harvest that field. But that's all in God's hands, in God's time. So I went back to my room and I packed, made sure I had everything ready, because it was quite an early start to walk back into the city centre. About 25-minute, half-hour walk into the city centre from where I was staying in the morning to get ready for the train journey to Helsingborg. And that was 2.5 days in Helsingborg. So that was my Sunday. And if I ever needed a sign from God that that was where I was meant to be, and listening and obeying is paramount, I got it. I didn't. It was basically a big neon sign. It was a slap in the face and a reassurance of what I was doing, where I was, and how I was going about things was the right way of doing it. I'd learnt so many things from the Christians I'd met, the family I'd met over there. They're not just Christians over there, they're family. I'd met brothers and sisters in Christ, and I've been shown things that I won't ever forget. So if there's any questions, any comments, please leave them down there. Feel free. I'll try and answer as many as I can. If I can't, I'll admit it. I'm not the most knowledgeable person in the world, and we'll see how we go. If you want to follow me on Twitter, my Twitter handle is StupidJesus. And if you want to follow up on the other vlogs I do, just click the subscribe button. And again, thank you for watching. Take care. God bless.